It's time to get the story behind the story. Interviews with newsmakers, news breakers, and Vermonters making a difference. WCAX presents 802 News with Mark Johnson. Here's Mark.
Peter Gould is a true Renaissance man, an author, activist, teacher, and theater director. He came to Vermont in the 70s as part of the Back to the Land movement and joined a commune in Guilford. In May, he testified at the Vermont legislature about his recent book, which explores the downside of the for-profit prison industry. A core civic facility in Mississippi currently holds about 150 Vermont prisoners. Gould also runs a Shakespeare summer camp for kids in Greensboro, which starts up again soon. 80 years young, he says he's lived a magical life. Our discussion begins after a word from our sponsor, Red Hen Baking Company. Big changes these days at Red Hen Baking Company. They just opened the doors at their new establishment in downtown Montpelier, a move customers have long requested. There's plenty of parking, and the pastries and other delights like sandwiches and salads have never been tastier. You can order online or just head in. Red Hen bread is also available at many other fine grocery stores throughout Vermont. At Red Hen Baking Company, Randy, George, and Eliza Kane focus on quality. Stop in soon to their new location on Main Street in the capital city. Let's start with in May when you went to the legislature and talked to them. You appeared before the Institution and Corrections Committee, and you testified about prison practices. And I guess my first question is, I know you wrote about this in one of your novels. What triggered your interest in corrections issues?
Well, for 15 years, I taught a class at Brandeis University, which was on the subject of how mindfulness practices might be used in conflict, and it was a very popular class. And we did a lot of restorative circles. We did a lot of facilitated dialogue. And my co-teacher John Ungerleider and I talked a lot as we drove down and took the train down about how restorative practices, restorative justice, would be able to be an effective tool to reduce the prison population, at least partly in Vermont. When my previous novel, Right Naked, which was published by Farrar, Straus and Giroux, when it won a national prize for its environmental content, my wife Molly introduced me at the State House, and I was sitting in the Senate seats there, and people got up and they clapped, and then I didn't know that I could leave after that. I just sat there, and I began to dream about, well, what if I were a 15-year-old girl, and what if I was sitting there, and what if when the representative from my mythical town, I don't even know what it's called yet, introduced me, and what if everybody jumped to their feet with thunderous applause and clapped and cheered? What would that person have done to find, to be so well known? And I didn't know. I really didn't know. I sort of had to write the book to find out. So I had this character jump into my head. Her name was Letty, and she's somebody who never gave a thought to being a clown, to being a red-nosed girl, but on a class field trip. She lives in a little town in Vermont. On a class field trip to New York City, the boys in her group, who were actually really acting very obnoxious, went into a joke store, and she hung out outside and then decided to go in, found herself in front of a display of clown noses. And she didn't know that when she put that clown nose on, she would be joining a tradition of clowns and jesters who speak truth to power, and that was almost going to become a superpower of hers. She has only one friend in the school. His name is Trevor. He's gay, flamboyant, big and heavy. He's black, and his dad is in prison, in a for-profit prison in Mississippi. And they decide to work together to write a paper for their advanced placement U.S. history class. And over the weeks of working on it, it becomes more of a personal story for Trevor and a personal story for her. And they decide they have to go on a road trip to Mississippi. to visit his dad. He hasn't really met his dad. He hasn't seen him since he was about 3. And that leads you to think about and talk about, why are people incarcerated in the first place? Why are they incarcerated for stuff that should maybe have only had a year sentence? Why are they incarcerated so far away? And these kids, particularly her with her ability to speak truth to power, really thinks about that a lot. And when they go to Mississippi and he meets his dad for the first time, she has a lot of thoughts about that. And they come back and they write letters to the editor. They write articles for their local paper, and it's about 2 teens who decide that Vermont really has to revisit its first of all, its punitive justice system. It's too easy decision to keep people incarcerated for a much longer time than would seem to be fair, and to keep them incarcerated far away. So I was fired up, and I had a lot of opinions about it. Read a lot of books, read a lot of stuff online about it, and I said, I'm going to go to Waterbury, and I'm going to talk to the guy who runs the Mississippi desk. And I went there with my feelings, my prejudices, and they were really nice to me. They gaslighted me. They made me, forget my prejudices that I had walked in that brand new door with. And they said, and Rick Burns said, man, the for-profit prison in Mississippi is pretty nice. It's much nicer than anything we have here. It costs us only about a third as much to incarcerate somebody there. And, I said, well, I want to go there with you. And we almost got it. He had to go through his supervisors, and one of the supervisors nixed the trip. I said, you'll take a legislator, you'll take a reporter. Why don't you take a writer of young adult fiction? And he agreed, but he couldn't get people higher up to agree. So I planned a trip with a Black friend of mine from here. That's when COVID hit, and I never went. But the reason I could write about it is that I have experience working as an actor in prisons. I've worked at the maximum security youth prison in New Mexico. I had some amazing experiences there, and I also led the Brandeis University expeditionary learning trip to the border with Arizona and Mexico, and went into the prisons, into the detention centers there. Still, even after my studies and after being, learning a lot more, I still have pretty strong feelings about Vermont, even wanting to have anything to do with Core Civic or Geo Group, because right now their hands are really bloodied with the work that they're doing with detention centers. Their stockholders are happy. And Rick Burns said, you can have your attitude if you want to about for-profit prisons, but what's the difference? Every single service that we in our shabby old prisons in Vermont offer to the prisoners is for profit. The mail, the food, the medical care, the phone calls, the video games, anything. It's all for profit. So what's the difference, Peter? So that's what I was talking about at the institutions, the corrections committee. But Republicans and Democrats, they were looking at each other from the different places where they sat, and they were really spellbound because they hadn't had somebody who was just a fiction writer come in to talk about something like that. I said, you can read the book or you can not read the book, and you can have your attitude about how long you think people who have done harm to society or to individuals should be locked away. But I just invite you to think about what kind of a world you want your grandchildren to live in these terms. What do you want the incarceration practices, the responsibility of the Vermont government to be when your grandchildren grow up? And you could see that they all knew that they would like it to be better somehow.
How did you respond to the corrections commissioner when he made the point about what's the difference between the Vermont prisons and Core Civic and the for-profit one down in Mississippi?
Well, I mean, one of the things he said is, that was not the commissioner. That was the person who ran the out-of-state prison
Okay,
desk.
gotcha.
Rick
Thank you.
at the time. He's retired now, but that made me think, well, fine, it might cost the state a lot less money to keep a man down there, but think about how much it costs the families to go down and see them. And since I come from a writer's, an artistic perspective, right away I thought, what's the harm to the families? What's the harm in that? And he said, well, a lot of these men come from home situations which are so bad and street situations which are so bad that they feel they'd rather be far away from Vermont because Vermont's where they get in trouble.
Wow.
So,
Yeah,
but
I wouldn't have thought of that.
But that's not everybody. Some of them would rather be home. Some of them would not like to be locked up for that long. Some of them feel like they've already paid their debt to society. Some people would like to see their kids go through junior high school, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I thought of was just the distance and how isolated people that are in prison in Mississippi must feel. I
Mhm.
didn't really think as much about the families having to travel to go and see them, but I think that's a good point.
Well, I recently read a statistic because they were interviewing some men from Vermont who were in the facility, the Core Civic facility down in Mississippi, who said that they had never had a single visit.
Wow.
That must have some effect on them, even if they're toughened, hardened criminals.
Those visits would be just such a lifeline.
Absolutely. Well, that's what my novel is about. It's called Red Nose Girl, and it's about her superpower of telling the truth gets her to be in a situation where she comes to the state house, she testifies, her best friend testifies, then it takes off from there. A club is formed by kids, high school kids from all over the state who have family in prison, and it makes it such a groundswell of strong opinion among the young people who are the most harmed by their parents being so far away that the governor and the state, the rest of the people in the state government have to take a look at it, take another look.
Speaking truth, particularly speaking truth to power these days, can be a little dangerous.
Yes, but that's why I call the novel Red Nose Girl, because if you wear a clown nose, it's not dangerous, because clowns are the people that have always been able to speak truth to power, jesters also, without fear of harm, because there's some kind of an archetypal rule that says you can't hurt a clown, even for speaking the truth.
I want to get back to that in a moment. Do you think you had any sway on the committee about what you said?
I've been a performer, of vaudeville type shows with my co-participant Stearns. We were Gould and Stearns for all those years, and most of our 4,000 performances involved setting up, doing a show, leaving town, going away, not having any information or any even general impression of what the effect upon the audience was. And I would say to Stephen, well, as long as there was one person in that room who was really reached and touched by what we had to say, then I'm satisfied. But it was in May that I went to the committee. Adjournment followed it a couple of weeks later, and I have no idea what the takeaway was for some of the people in that room, but the feeling was very strong.
Interesting. You mentioned being a clown. You've been a clown for quite a long time.
I've been a performer of physical comedy and mime, pantomime, political theater. Some percentage of that has been uh, clowning.
What is it about it that was appealing?
Well, I was born with a stammer. I had a really difficult time in school. I was a really good student, but participating in class was a no-no for me because I was too embarrassed about my speech, and and I knew I was a creative, artistic person. So that's why I had the urge to become a writer. I wrote all the time. Later on, I discovered theater. One of my short stories at Brandeis was made into a pantomime show. I asked the director whether I could be in it, and I found that I had a facility for nonverbal communication, not just with writing, but with my body too. Then I studied with some of the best teachers in the United States and Mexico to learn more about physical comedy and physical expression. And also in Mexico, particularly from the whole summer of 1979, studying at a mime and circus school, I got in touch with what the teacher called my personal clown character, my comediante, and that's been very strong. So for my first few years of performing, I was silent. And then the United States got involved in El Salvador, and I was like, I can't keep silent about this. Gotta write a play.
How did you work through your stammer?
Shakespeare helped me a lot. I was I had a reluctance to go on stage and break through my veil of silence. Would have a kazoo in my mouth. I would make some sound effects, but speaking, actually speaking whole speeches was very hard for me. And then I was discovered Shakespeare, and I was cast in the role of uh, Caliban. And I took to Shakespeare. There was a rhythm and a truth and a power to the speech, which just overwhelmed any inborn, innate, or practiced obstacles that I might have to expressing myself verbally. I was still living on the commune at that time. I made a costume out of deerskin and out of some beef ribs that we from a cow that we'd slaughtered, and I had a really long afro hair, which I smeared with mud before the performances. And I went out in front of like 500 people and said, "This island is mine by Sycorax, my mother, which thou dost take from me." And I was, whoa, what's that voice coming out of me? I couldn't believe it. And that's the power which I try to share, and which I have shared for 29 years at my Shakespeare camp up in the Northeast Kingdom. Many people have heard that story. Many kids have heard that story, and many kids have said, "Yeah, I want that too." So I've helped hundreds of kids get that get access to that kind of verbal power through the medium of Shakespeare.
Wow. Have you ever heard by any chance of a guy named Alan Rabinowitz?
No.
He was one of the most interesting people that I've ever interviewed. He had a terrible stutter as a child, but when he went to the Bronx Zoo, he could talk to the animals without a
Yeah.
stutter.
Yeah. Well,
And he wound up becoming a wildlife conservationist as a result of it. I mean, it's a story, just telling it to you here right now, I just get a little overwhelmed thinking about
yeah.
this guy.
Yeah. In my book, Horse-Drawn Yogurt, which is the book my wife wanted me to write, which is my memoir of life on the commune. It tells about my 9 years on Packer Corners farm. I, I left graduate school at Harvard. I moved to the commune in Vermont. We all said we were fighting the Vietnam War, but I knew in my heart that I was coming to learn how to speak. I would go out every night for a walk. I talked to the trees. I had chickens. I talked to the chickens, talked to the cow while I milked, and uh, I I mean I can see becoming a wildlife biologist would give you uh, fluency. And now since I've become a Shakespearean all these years, I've done a whole lot of voice training. I've studied with an opera singer for 15 years to develop power in my voice so that if I feel a stammer starting to well up, I have enough juice to just to go through it. On
Wow.
my bucket list is to offer a Shakespeare camp to people who have a really bad stutter, and I would call it "Get Thee to the Funnery." And I even have a couple friends who stutter and act who say, "Put me on the staff, I'll be there." And it will be 1 week long. It'll be a sleepover camp, and it'll have a money back guarantee.
Wow. Tell me more about this camp and why you think it's so powerful for these kids.
Um, well, all right. Um, I was doing some workshops in schools in Shakespeare in the late 90s. And I came up to Craftsbury School, was working to try to do a workshop in the school. And the teachers said, we don't have any time to let the students away from the curriculum. So the music teacher, Andrea Breitenbach, and I said, fine, we'll wait until school ends. We'll do a camp. And that was in 1998. And that's how it started. It started small with Romeo and Juliet and 12 kids. And when I was about halfway through it, I realized I was really onto something because like the experience that I had, these kids were finding an incredible amount of fluency uh, by speaking lines that were not theirs, but were by not their own. But they were we had this motto, the sign of the four, developing the heart, the mind, the body, and the voice, and making sure that everybody in the whole cast understood every single word that everybody else was saying, even if it was not their scene and their line. And again, I saw pretty early on that the audience was understanding every word that they heard because the actors were understanding every word that they spoke. And there was a power to the whole thing because the kids they were they were realizing that Shakespeare's not hard. If I use my voice, if I understand it with my mind, if I do a lot of the physical things that Peter teaches, my body, and if I really work on the heart too, have enough compassion for the audience, even the people sitting far away, I want them to hear, to understand everything I'm saying. This incredible magic takes place between the performer and the audience, and that's only gotten better, better over the years. We've gotten better at what we do. I've had some people who've been on the staff for 20 years. They keep coming back because they want another dose. And uh, because I work with young people, maybe 30 a year at the Shakespeare camp and then others in other schools, I have their voices in my head. So not only have I helped them to find their voice through Shakespeare, but they helped me find a voice for my young adult fiction at the same time.
You said you started with 12 kids. You've got a camp starting in a month or so. How many will be there this year?
28.
So it's
And
grown quite a bit.
yeah, we try to get 25 to 30 every year. We shoehorn them all into one play, one production. We cycle through the same 7 or 8 plays. So this year I'll be doing Much Ado About Nothing for the 6th time, I think.
I mean, I'm a little surprised to hear that younger people were taken in by Shakespeare because I think of it more as an adult thing. Did you have that fear or not?
No, I mean, I think born with a stutter, I think you get a happy gene and a brave gene that goes with it. It never even occurred to me that I should be worried or nervous about it. It just didn't. And to direct some of these young people in monologues, which are so revealing of unbelievable deep anguish truth inside of a human, and find that these kids of 13 or 14 years old can convince the audience that they are 50-year-old Claudio, with regret about the murder of Hamlet that he did. And I always find a way every year. Some of my staff get upset with me. Oh, Peter, what social issue are we going to talk about this year? Is it going to be climate change?
Yeah.
Is it going to be teenage grief? Is it going to be, what is it going to be this year? We did Romeo and Juliet. I can't think of any issues there, but they we make sure that there's always some discussion about powerful issues that the kids can relate to because they're uppermost issues in their lives. You can just picture this. We did Hamlet. We've done Hamlet 5 or 6 times also, but maybe 12 years ago, there was a girl. She was about 14 years old. Everybody's on stage for the whole time. They sit in a semicircle and they participate and they react and respond. So she, as Hamlet, walked out and took a knife and held it to her wrist. And everybody in the audience went, "Whoa, stop." And she was like, "What? To be or not to be? Big freaking deal." And she didn't say big freaking deal, but it's like, come on. Whether it's nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows or take arms against a sea of trouble. So there was a conversation going between all the other campers and her about whether or not she should go through with this ultimate self-harm. And it made the speech more understandable to probably 90% of the people in the audience who know to be or not to be, but don't have a clue about what the speech is really about.
I'm sure you've noticed this. Have you noticed the change in young and kids over the years? I mean, it just seems like there's so many teenagers and young adults out there really struggling.
Yeah, yeah. And particularly boys, I think. I don't know. But yes, in my teaching at Brandeis, the kids wrote about all the anxieties that they had, and yeah, it's a very tough time. And of course, they must be absorbing the stuff from the atmosphere. The air that we breathe and the water we drink is full of Trumpism and negativism and cynicism, and greed. And so sometimes the speeches, the very speeches that they're speaking, reveal truths about that. I make it clear, you know what you're talking about here, right? You're talking about corruption and greed, right? Do you have any current examples of where that might be a thing that you might already be responding to? And these kids, they know a lot more than we give them credit for, and they also are absorbing a tremendous amount of anguish and pain from the environment, not to mention the smoke from the wildfires out west.
It's a very difficult time, I think, right now to be a young person and maintain optimism about the future.
Yeah, yeah, it is. But that's one of the great things about being alive today, because you can, if you look around, you can find a lot of young people doing incredible things, and you want to, hitch your wagon to their star because they have confidence.
Where do the kids that go to your camp, where do they come from?
So it's a day camp, so they have to live in the area, or if they don't live in the area, their parents or friends, they form a carpool to bring them up. Say, I got 4 kids from U32 school in Montpelier who make the hour commute, and then if I identify some kids that I think really could use this, and they're from far away, then it's my job to work out a homestay for them. And there's usually a family or two who have a kid in the camp will say, "Yeah, let's try it out. We can offer a home." Some great friendships have been made because of that, that have lasted for decades.
You mentioned you were part of the Back to the Land movement here in Vermont. So why did you come?
Well, that was simple. I was living in Boston. I dropped out of Harvard graduate school. It was the wrong time to be in graduate school. It was 1968,
Mhm.
in which hiding behind a graduate school deferment seemed really lame. And some friends of mine at Boston University had just bought the farm up here in Guilford. They had a personal mortgage from the farmer's wife. The farmer had just died. It was $22,000 for 100 acres and a house and a barn and a couple outbuildings. She had the engine running. There was no key. They came, they made the first payment. She was gone and she never came back. And it was a 10-year mortgage at $225 a month. We always found the money for it. I had a little marijuana patch there, never sold a drop. We just figured we did some odd jobs around. We were able to collect the money every month, and we learned super skills from the people who lived around there. We helped people get in their hay. We help people in hard times, and we learned how to farm. I learned how to milk a cow. I went around to all the other communes and taught them how to make cheese. My cheeses were terrible. But in so doing, opened up the first entrance to the age that we're living in now, the golden age of cheese in Vermont, of artisan cheese in Vermont. And then the like 5 years after I was there, we started the farmers market in Brattleboro, which soon grew to be the most successful one in the state. When I walk around there, I don't think anybody knows that I was one of the founders, unless I tell them, which I sometimes do. And I came because my friends had already bought the place. I had directions, how to get there. And pretty much as soon as I got there, I realized they were onto a good thing. I should stay. I wasn't quite ready. I had some other things to do to clean up my, loose threads to tie up before I moved there. But it was pretty interesting because as soon as I moved there, just a couple of weeks after I moved to the farm, my father died of a heart attack at 54 because my living there was the last thing that he really knew about me that gave me more strength and more resolve to stay. And it also gave me a kick to write my first book, which was Burnt Toast.
Do you look back on that period with fondness or you have any regrets about it?
No regrets at all. No. I mean, I think about it every day. And when we get together, to like for holidays, for May Day or something like that, it's just wonderful to see the people that I went through that experience with. When I did the book launch for horse-drawn yogurt, I did it at the farm, had about 60 people come there. And I'm not a person who has much regret. I have more of a magical view of life.
Has that period of time been romanticized by the next generations after you, or
Um, well, you say that you might think that this is a difficult time to be young in this country, and so I think some of the romanticization of those years comes from those young people who know that they're not going to be able to have an experience like that. If they do, the price of land, the price of an old side hill farm is now $650,000, and you can't get it until the kitchen has been redone anyway. So and so that this kind of experience that I was lucky to have it's really out of reach, and that's sad.
What would you say if I asked you how you think Vermont has changed?
Um, uh, Well, it is a balancing act because you want some things that you value about the state to remain the same, and you also don't want it to be locked in its past. When I moved here, it was a very white state, and I love the fact that there are more parts of the state which are more cultural, multiracial. The big change is, of course, the effect of greed upon the life that people in Vermont are trying to lead. If you want to come here now to raise a family, it's so hard to find a place to live. And there's lots of reasons. I mean, people moved out of the city with the pandemic, bought up a lot of places. That was a real estate spike. The value of real estate really changed in the Reagan years too. So since 1980, there's been a change in the valuation of real estate. There, what other changes? I think it's just lately that there's more polarization between the right and the left, and partly that result is that I mean the reason for that, at least in my eye, is that it's just a struggle to make ends meet. Wouldn't it be nice if everybody in the country just had single payer health insurance? The fact that we don't budge on that is just such a marker that the insurance companies have such power over every aspect of our lives. And I just know that if some people were able to know that they didn't have to worry about health insurance, that was a given, that they would then be willing to say, I think I'm going to try this life in which I'm not thinking about every single dollar that I earn, and maybe I can get a couple other people and go in on a farm and see whether we can grow some food. When I was living in the back to the land farm, the only insurance I had, we all paid collectively for the fire insurance for the farmhouse. And we all had basic liability insurance for our old cars. But the way that insurance has reached into every aspect of our lives, it's going to be very hard to extricate ourselves from. So the big change is that you just need more money to survive, I think. My son, Eli, he's 54 years old. He went to Yale. He studied forestry. He studied architecture. He became a timber framer. He bought himself a little sawmill. He bought himself some wonderful architectural software, and he went to work. And after 4 or 5 years of sawing the timber for a couple of timber frame companies down here, he had a company that employed about 12 people, building timber frame houses, restoration of timber frame houses, and also he was working as a consultant to wood manufacturers in Quebec. So he would go up there, learn some French, do some work with them to try to figure out what they were doing with value-added wood products. And he would cross the border, and he would immediately come to a place where contractors didn't have to have $50,000 in what's that insurance called? Workers' comp, you know? So his expenses to run his organization and do quality work were so off the charts that he finally had to let everybody go and just work by himself. But in so doing, he left behind the anxiety of waking up in the morning wondering if he could put food and money into the hands of the workers who was working for him. Very stressful.
Where do you think the breaking point in all of this is going to be?
Well, I'm with Bernie and AOC. It's got to be healthcare. But we all have retirement accounts. And some of our retirement accounts may be one small portion in mutual funds or whatever. But what's going to happen to the stock market if all those great big investment firms, which call themselves insurance companies, suddenly don't have the money to invest? There's going to be a tremendous reckoning. But we all have to have health care. That's an absolute given. But if you put some of those insurance companies out of work, that will also affect our investments, and it'll put thousands of people who Michael Moore has proved are just writing there to deny claims out of work. Well, you were interested in my Shakespeare work. Oh, I have to tell you about my newest book too, Part for the Whole.
Yeah.
They sort of go together. But one of my favorite speeches in Hamlet puts King Claudius, who killed his brother, in his little chapel, praying after Hamlet has proved beyond a doubt that he's the guilty one by doing the play within the play. And I usually have a girl play this role because the audience just responds so well. And the king goes, "Oh, my offense is rank. It smells to heaven. It hath the primal eldest curse upon it, a brother's murder. Pray, can I not, though inclination be as sharp as will, my stronger guilt defeats my strong intent. What if this cursed hand were thicker than itself with brother's blood? Is there not rain enough in the sweet heavens to wash it white as snow? Then I'll look up, and my fault is past. But what prayer can serve my turn? Forgive me my foul murder? This cannot be, because I am still possessed of the effects for which I did the murder, my crown, my own ambition, and my queen. In the corrupted currents of this world, 'tis often seen offence's gilded hand doth shove by justice, and oft 'tis shown the wicked prize itself buys out the law, etc. And we're living in this time when there is so much greed at every level, and the wicked prize itself buys out the law, and people that were once respected prosecutors and lawyers have been bought out. And I make sure that the kids understand this, that that's what this speech is about, this little known speech in this popular play. And they go, "What? Is that really in there? That's what Shakespeare said?" So to answer your question, I sort of look to Shakespeare to, to solve those problems for me and to give me answers to those questions. It's all there. It's all there.
Talk about your new book, Part for the Whole. What's the point you're trying to make in this?
This is the coolest thing. The coolest thing. I know you like newspapers, right? I used to
Yes.
work on a newspaper. So in 1997, an article appeared in the Brattleboro Reformer. And I was just about to start my PhD studies at Brandeis. So I couldn't do anything about it. But I'll read a little bit of it. It's very short. It's called "Seized Artist Says He Had to Paint a Nude." A Mexican artist seized at gunpoint off the street says his kidnappers forced him to paint a nude portrait of a wealthy woman. ... This is a whim, Para quoted his kidnappers as telling him. There's a very rich lady who likes your painting a lot, and she wants you to paint her. Para said he was given paintbrushes and forced to look through a hole in the wall at the model, who would pose nude for about an hour at a time. And I says to myself, there's a novel there. So I cut it out of the reformer and I push pinned it up on my wall. But I was just starting my doctoral studies and I couldn't get to it for about 5 years. So I wrote this novel about a high school English teacher who reads the article. So I put the article in the book, and who wants to share the story with his class, but then he doesn't. And then he realizes that he wants to do a copycat crime. He's sort of a fan of Kurt Vonnegut. He knows that there's a seed crystal out there, and he knows that there's one person that he could reach and kidnap them and make them look through a hole in the wall with a gun to their head, make them write about what they see. He's not sure what it is that they're going to see. He thinks that he could so convince them that art is the most important thing of all, that they would change their view of government support of the arts. So it's a novel about rescuing the National Endowment for the Arts, which I started to write in 2003 when the endowment was already on the ropes because money was being pulled from it. And it took off in me. When I'm writing a fiction, I get a voice in my head that cannot be denied. I listen to it, write down what he says or she says, and this voice in my head was very strong, that this person thought that they could do something about the situation of the National Endowment for the Arts. And he's not a violent person at all. So he knows he's not going to kidnap somebody, even though that's what the article modeled. So he's, as a theater person, I thought, well, he could do a play in which the person is called up as a volunteer from the audience so that he doesn't know that a sequestration has taken place, and do it in a hotel room. And the cool thing about it is that there's a really wonderful hotel in Brattleboro called the Latches Hotel. It's Greek modeled. And so wherever the story takes place, I took the Latches Hotel and put it there. And so the theater piece takes place in a room at the Latches, and the guy that he picks to be the victim volunteer shows up because he has to. And he doesn't have to have a gun held to his head because it's a theater piece. And for some reason, this strange turn of events in the protagonist's mind has a positive ending. But the wonderful thing about it, the most wonderful thing about it, and one of the reasons I say that I lead a magical life is that when I had a version of this novel after 3 years, third or fourth draft, my wife Molly and I went to Mexico, to the city that we know very well, and we talked to some artist friends, and one of them said, "You want to meet the guy? I know where he lives." I went, "Sure."
Oh my gosh.
So I'd made a Xerox copy of the novel, and we went to the artist's studio and met him and put it on his lap. And I told him what I had done with the story that had appeared in the Brattleboro Reformer. He didn't know about the town. He didn't know about that the story had ever gone beyond the city where he lives. And he just looked at me and said, "Es muy complicado, Pedro." It's very complicated. And the complication about it, you have to read the book to see what it was, because it's so cool. Because so art, life, layered. John Potter, the executive director of the Latches Corporation, Hotel and Theater,
Yeah, I
and
was going to say there's a theater.
we've been talking about this for 7 or 8 years. And finally, this fall, I'm going to be doing a staged reading of those particular chapters of the novel in the hotel room which the story is modeled on, for a select audience of 22 people who might fit into the hotel room itself. It's going to be awesome.
You really have lived a pretty magical life, haven't you?
I I, I have, but it continues to be magical, because I think if you cultivate a magical approach to life, magical things happen. Like as an example, I was teaching Spanish at Marlborough School for years, and I was walking through the streets of Hardwick, and I saw that one of my Shakespeare students was doing a dinner to raise money for her trip to Nicaragua, because she's Mexican herself. So I thought, oh, when I get home, I'm going to write a $25 check to her. And then when I sat down to write the check, I said, "I'll send 50." I wrote the check. I went, "Oh, shoot, I'm getting late for teaching up at Marlborough." I licked the stamp. No, I didn't lick it. I peeled it, put it in the mailbox, drove up the hill to Marlborough School, having just spent $50 that I didn't really have. But I said to myself, these things always come back to me. This is not a lie. I walked into the school. The principal saw me drive up and park. She leaned her head. She said, "Peter, may I talk with you?" And I'm like, "What did I do? Are my classes too much fun?" And she said, I don't know how to tell you this, but we had a board meeting last night and we made a terrible mistake. We underpaid you last year by $1,500. And I went, "I knew it." And this kind of stuff happens to me all the time. But I think it's important for you to have you have enough clarity in your thinking, in your meditating, and in your encounter with the world to invite magical events like that into your world. Works for me.
That wraps it up for this edition of 802 News, sponsored by Red Hen Baking Company. Thanks for listening.